He will forever be known as the man who broke Babe Ruth's home run record. Yet 57-year-old Hank Aaron says his best-selling autobiography isn't a baseball book at all. He wants us to know what it was like for a black man playing baseball during some of the historic changes in his sport and in our society. He spent 23 years playing the game he loves, mostly in Milwaukee and Atlanta. But the story of Hank Aaron begins in the black community of Tolmanville, outside of Mobile, Alabama. In the early 40s, the baseball field Hank Aaron played on looked a lot different than the ball fields do today. Now, I understand the field that you all played in, which was then the old Tolmanville field, that you had to work around the vegetables that were planted.
Work around the vegetables and work around what you thought was first base, too, because the cows would be out there, you know. So every now and then you would think you'd be picking up a baseball, you'd be picking up something else.
During the Big Depression, Mobile's port offered work for Hank's father, Herbert Aaron. He was a Boilermaker's assistant who also operated a tavern in the community where Hank grew up. At 79, he still runs a tavern. The difference now is Herbert Aaron owns the place. The Aaron Sports Page and Social Club used to be a grocery store.
I bought it for him. I never forget, we just sitting there, you know, one night, and I told him, I said, it's yours. And we sat in there counting cans of poking beans and sardine crackers and loaves of bread and everything. And he said, boy, he said, I finally made it.
As the Aaron family grew, so did the Aaron house. Hank says his daddy just kept adding on to it as each of the 8 Aaron children arrived. I also understand you spent a lot of time throwing balls on roofs.
I did. I could take a baseball and throw it on the top of the roof. And by the time it get on the other side, I could run around the other side and catch it. You know, I would play by myself. You know, I didn't have anybody else to play with me, so I would pretend like I was going to catch the ball, you know.
There was a fire inside the youngster that burned to play baseball.
I did almost anything for someone to throw a ball to me. I did almost anything for someone to just stand out there with me, to pitch a ball to me. So I played with boys that was much older than I was when I was growing up, but I learned an awful lot.
He learned enough to be chosen for a team in the old Negro American League right out of high school. He earned $200 a month. Aaron knew he would make it to the majors. He had the ability, and a young second baseman from California ran over the only other barrier.
Jackie Robinson in 1947 became the first of his race to play in the major leagues.
5 years later, the then Boston Braves followed and signed Aaron to a farm team for $350 a month. Hank headed north. Before he went to the majors, Hank would first play a season in the South Atlantic League. That meant integrating the all-white league, facing hostile crowds in deep South cities. He faced it with determination and detachment.
I looked at what Jackie Robinson had been through even before I had been in the major leagues, and I said, you know, I am determined. The ability was there, and I was not going to let anyone turn me around.
When I read in your book about the prejudice you went through from the very beginning, people would, your father said he would sit in the stands and watch you play and be afraid to let folks at times know you were his son because they were saying, hit him in the head, hit him.
We felt that eventually everything was going to be all right. As long as they didn't physically come out and harm us, you know, they didn't come out and shoot, grab us off the field and lynch us or do some of those ugly things, that we were going to eventually win.
At the end of the season, Hank was voted most valuable player. The crowds that used to boo him, he says, did something amazing his last game.
They took a bucket, this is the truth, they'd taken a bucket and they went around the stands in Jacksonville and collected money. And I think they came with something like $200 or $300 that they got to give to me. I carried it in the clubhouse and split it among all my teammates.
Oh, that's nice.
Hank Aaron of the Braves always will be known as one of baseball's finest wrist hitters. He won batting
In
titles in
1954, he signed with the Milwaukee Braves. That move ignited one of the most impressive careers in baseball. When it was over in 1976, he held the record for most home runs, most runs batted in, and most total base hits. Those records have yet to be equaled. But the one that moved him from star to superstar was also the record that brought him the most grief.
Balls it deep, deep. It is good. He did it. He
In Atlanta's Fulton County Stadium, batting as an Atlanta Brave, Hank Aaron hit home run 715, shattering baseball immortal Babe Ruth's home run record.
I myself even looked back at some of those days and said, you know, this should have been the greatest time of my life. And yet I look back and it was probably some of the saddest time because I was living in a bubble. I was living in a time when people was just so hateful.
As Hammerin Hank got closer and closer to the record, the hate came in the form of letters, literally hundreds of thousands. He kept some of them. Dear Nigger, everybody loved Babe Ruth. You will be the most hated man in the country if you break his career home run record. Dear Hank, you are a very good ball player, but if you come close to Babe Ruth's 714 homers, I have a contract out on you.
Some people say, well, why put it in the book? Why did you put it in the book? Why did you keep those letters? And I say, you know, the thing that I think most of us have to remember is that we're not talking about centuries ago. We're talking about just a few years ago.
Yeah. But when you broke it, did it change? Did people jump on the bandwagon?
Most of them did. What really happened is that it put me in a position where now, you know, the only thing that people thought about, home runs. The thing that bothers me, if someone come to me and say, well, you know, Babe Ruth was a better ball player, that's fine, that's their opinion, that's good. But don't get to the point where they got to viciously have it a racial thing, you know, where just because I happen to be a black player playing, that you can't do certain things, because that's not true.
Aaron says some people were upset that he spoke out about racial problems in baseball. On his first major league team, Aaron and other black players forced management to house white and black players in the same hotel. It happened during spring training. Before that, the black players lived in a rooming house run by a black woman. He continued lobbying for better treatment, but says mainstream media didn't pick up on it until he was close to Babe Ruth's record.
As I said before, you know, when you have 400 home runs, people probably don't pay you too much attention, but when you hit 700 home runs, then they start paying you a little bit more attention, you know. So I think that they seen what they wanted to.
You know what I think it is? That people expected to see you marching. When what you were doing on the field was the best example.
That's true. I was not the marching kind. I just can't picture anyone kicking me, spitting on me, or doing some things. And just like Dr. King said, if you're not willing to take that, don't march.
Instead, he's persistently criticized the lack of minorities in baseball's front offices. As vice president of the Braves, Aaron is one of only a handful of blacks in high-ranking positions. Recently, a visit to Baseball Commissioner Fay Vinson about the issue put Aaron back in the spotlight. At one time, Hank Aaron changed the way America's game was played. On a different level, he says that's what he's doing now.
Do you, in one moment late at night, grab a bat to see if you can still do it?
I have retired from the old-timers game. So that means that my retirement is there. And, and let me tell you what. A lot of people say, well, why don't you play in old-timers games anymore? You know, I've been out of baseball since '76, and this is '91. So, you know, kids that retired 2 years ago, those pitchers can still throw pretty good. And can you imagine me walking up to the plate and some kid out there, oh, I love it, I'm going to strike Hank Aaron out. You know, and I say, hey, I don't need this. You know, in spring training, when I go to West Palm Beach, a baseball be by my feet and I kick it. You know, I don't even pick it up. Because if I pick it up, I'm going to try to throw it, and if I throw it, my whole arm is going with it. So I decided to leave it alone. Let some of these young kids pick it up, you know. Instead of swinging here with a locked wrist, it make you pop your wrist a little bit more, you know.
But he'll play for the kids. Aaron is national spokesman for the Big Brothers and Sisters organization. Together with RBIs restaurants, Aaron awards annual scholarships to that organization. Aaron's own 5 children are grown now. None plays baseball, but there was a time his youngest son, Larry, did. Larry Aaron made it as far as the Braves farm team. Hank remembers one of the toughest decisions he made when he realized his son wasn't going any farther.
And he couldn't understand that. He was very frustrated, you know, and at that time I was the farm director. And I said to myself one night, lying in bed, I said, now what am I going to do with him? Because I said, now he is just continuing to go on going this way, and he's not playing, and he's not doing anything. So I called him in the office and released him. But then he went back to school, got his degree, he's teaching school, and the other day, not the other day, well, last year, he came to me and said, Daddy, he said, I want to thank you for what you did for me. People just don't realize, and I told this friend of mine, I said, hey, I said, it was harder for me to release my own son if I thought he had any kind of ability to play, to get to the big league. Don't you think I would have helped him?
Folks are lining up for autographed copies of his book. Atlanta already displays his figure in bronze and recently included his name in the city celebrity walk. Life is good for Hank Aaron, but he's not sitting back.
You'd be surprised at what doors can be opened. But you can't sit back and wait for these doors to open because they'll never open.
So you got to have your hammer to knock them down.
You've got to.
Henry Louis Aaron is married to second wife Billy. They met on the show that Billy hosted, Today in Georgia, that was seen here on WSB. Hank has a 10-year-old grandson, Renal. He loves to play baseball, and Hank told me the youngster has a fit if he has to sit on the bench, just like Grandpa did. I'll be right back.